allegations against the chairperson. The first was that without recourse to the commission, she engaged the services of lawyers, that is, sorry at law, without going through the procurement process as the law demands, and that there is no formal contractual arrangement between the commission and the law firm, and the basis for computing legal fees are known, involving fees of 400,000 Ghana cedis. The committee found that there was no documentary evidence of engagement of the appointment of sorry at law, which was in breach of the Public Procurement Act. The committee said that she appointed the lawyers through sole sourcing without the approval of the Public Procurement Authority, and that she misbehaved with the appointment of Messias sorry at law. It held further that, quote, the events surrounding the engagement of Messias sorry at law as lawyers for the Electoral Commission shows incompetence, ineptitude, and dereliction of duty on the part of Mrs. Charlotte Osei, and so we find, unquote. The second allegation was that the chairperson of the EC unilaterally abrogated a duly procured contract with the entity STL and awarded the same contract to the same entity without recourse to the commission and without due process of the Public Procurement Act. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you get this point. The committee says that it found that Mrs. Charlotte Osei cancelled contracts awarded by Mrs. Opoku Amankwa to STL. She cancelled these contracts and then turned round and awarded the same contracts. In other words, this time she then signed now with STL. The same contracts that you signed and the same terms and everything, you cancelled it. Then turned round and re-awarded the same contracts to the same company without recourse to the law. The committee found that upon her appointment in June 2015, Mrs. Osei detected some irregularities with the STL contract, which was yet to be performed and was right to have abrogated it. However, the committee found that her decision to unilaterally award fresh contracts to the same STL in the aggregate sum of $22,340,814 was illegal. That she failed to comply with the internal procurement procedures of the Electoral Commission created by the Commission itself, namely the Entity Tender Review Panel and the Public Procurement Act. All in all, she awarded 12 contracts to STL for the supply of ICT equipment and services. And the committee found that out of these 12 contracts, only one did not exceed her procurement threshold as chairperson, which was 50,000 cedis for goods and services before July 2016. In other words, as a chairperson, there's a limit, there's an amount of money beyond which you cannot unilaterally award a contract. I hope I'm clear. In other words, beyond that amount, you must recourse to the Public Procurement Authority. And in all these contracts, they exceeded the threshold of the amount that was within her power to authorize. But she went ahead to authorize nonetheless. That's the point that we are making. Except one out of the 12. All the letters awarding the 12 contracts to STL were signed by the chairperson herself between 8 February 2016 and 25 November 2016. The committee held, quote, that it was very absurd coming from the chairperson, the very person who led the crusade to abrogate the initial STL contracts, citing breaches of the Public Procurement Act, unquote. The Entity Tender Review Panel consists of the chairperson and her 2 deputies. The committee found that the STL contracts awarded by the chairperson was unlawful, violated sections 16 and 40 of the Public Procurement Act, Act 914. The committee found that she misbehaved, and misbehavior is a quotation, that, quote, she misbehaved in awarding the new STL contracts. It further held that she, quote, showed sheer incompetence in the manner she handled or conducted the award of new STL contracts, in view of her experience with the initial STL contracts, which were abrogated at her instance, unquote. The third allegation is over the decision to acquire a new office block for the commission. The committee found that the chairperson breached the law on procurement in awarding contracts for works and consultancy service for the new building. The Public Procurement Authority in February 2016 granted approval for the EC to award the contract for consultancy service for partitioning the new offices at the current sum of 98,000 Ghana cedis, 98,100 Ghana cedis, as requested by the EC. Note that the Public Procurement Authority approved a contract sum of 98,100 Ghana cedis to the commission for the partitioning of new offices. However, in April 2016, the chairperson wrote to the PPA for another restricted tender for internal partitioning of the new office block at a total cost of 3,410,268 Ghana cedis. This was also granted. The committee found that the two contracts for the partitioning of the new office block and the contract for consultant services were not put before the entity tender committee as created by the Public Procurement Act and the EC's old internal procedures. The committee further held that the contracts awarded far exceeded the threshold legally allowable to her per the procurement laws. The contracts awarded were 3,976,244 cedis instead of the approved 3,410,263 and 209,444 Ghana cedis instead of the approved 98,100. I'll take this again. In other words, the Public Procurement Authority had approved for the EC to award two contracts, one worth 3,410,263 Ghana cedis. Now, instead of the 3,410,263, which was approved by the PPA, she awarded the contract to the tune of 3,976,244. In the second instance, the PPA approved 98,100, but she ended up awarding 209,443 Ghana cedis. The committee therefore held both to be unlawful. The evidence of witnesses given against the chairperson were by her own staff. In other words, the staff of the Electoral Commission all appeared before the committee right in front of her and made these allegations against her, which the committee held she couldn't defend. The evidence of the witnesses given against the chairperson were by her own staff, namely the head of the procurement unit of the commission and the principal electoral officer. Now, the fourth allegation is about the award of contract for the construction of prefabricated district offices for the Electoral Commission and contract for consultancy for the prefabricated works against the procurement rules. From the evidence, the committee held that the construction of the offices was divided into 4 lots, and the chairperson personally awarded all 4 at the higher rate of $14,337,962. This was in excess of $6,837,962, and that she awarded the contracts without reference to the entity tender committee as required. To stress, the committee found that the value of the prefabricated office buildings was stated as $7.5 million in the letter to the PPA, but the contract was awarded by the chairperson to the tune of $14.3 million. I don't know whether this is clear. It says that she wrote to the PPA for approval for a contract sum of $7.5 million, but then came back and awarded the contract for 14.3 instead of the approved $7.5 million. The fifth allegation was about the use of donor support of $76,000 by a USAID grant for the EC's ICT environment. The contract for the design of the EC's website was also held to be illegal since she awarded the contract without recourse to the rules of procurement. The last allegation was also about the use of donor funds for an award to repackage the strategic plan of the commission, funded by the UNDP, and to develop a new logo for the commission. That was also in breach of the procurement law. All 6 allegations leveled against Mrs. Charlotte Osei related to breaches of the Public Procurement Act, Act 663, as amended by Act 914. The committee quotes the Chief Justice as having observed in her prima facie determination that, quote, the Public Procurement Act is an enactment which one may say is made in pursuance of the principles of probity and accountability expressed in Article 37(1) of the Constitution. It envisages that in the procurement of goods and services with public resources, there must be standard practices which are aimed at fairness and value for money so as to strengthen the national economy. It is for this reason, in my view, that the Act is so detailed and specific in the process and procedures it prescribes, unquote. In the words of the committee, quote, in all the procurement activities which we had to investigate, the findings have been that Mrs. Charlotte Osei failed to comply with the Public Procurement Act, unquote. The committee dismissed the defense by the chairperson that procurement was not part of her core functions. The committee observed that she herself was writing directly to seek approval from the PPA to do restricted tender, that she herself as chairperson wrote directly to companies to notify them of contract awards. It held, quote, if procurement of goods and services was not part of the core business of the Electoral Commission, as argued by Mrs. Charlotte Osei, why did she take over the above roles directly when there was a procurement unit with a head in the Electoral Commission, unquote. The committee concluded that enough evidence had been established and therefore recommended her removal from office as chairperson of the EC based on misbehavior and incompetence. It further recommended that the EC should cease using the services of Messiah Sorry at Law as solicitors, but that the firm be paid for the legal services it has rendered so far.